The broadcast is now starting. All attendees will listen only.
Or to camera 4. Look like me?
It's you.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock. We'll get this show rolling. Thank you for coming. I definitely appreciate everyone attending and taking time out for what is essentially, well, it's training. It's not absolutely required, but I definitely appreciate it. So tonight we're going to do part 2 of Ask Us Anything. Those of you who were here back in January of last year, we went through about 10 or a dozen questions out of this list of what is now 51 questions. And had a pretty good time, got a lot of good discussion, some hopefully good answers out of it, and had a lot of requests to continue with the list, as well as add to it. So we're going to do that again tonight. As you know, I'm Nathan Bilger, the planning director. You all know me. But, next slide, Brent. So, tonight we'll do introductions, then go through the questions, and then hit on the future training sessions. Next. Too far.
Sorry, there was a delay.
Okay. So, introductions tonight. We'll go around. Give us your name, your jurisdiction and board, how long you've been on that board, and your favorite cartoon character, and a brief reason why they are your favorite cartoon character. So, I already gave you my introduction. I think probably my favorite, it really depends, but if I just had to throw one out there, it'd probably be Homer Simpson. That's why he's up there, just because I feel like I have a connection. Used to be Bart, more Homer now. So, we'll go over to Brent here.
My name is Brent Bockelman. I am staff to County Plan Commission and BZA. I've been here for going on 4 years. Favorite cartoon character, Captain Caveman. Just because he's loud and you can't really understand him.
Okay. For introductions, let's start in the back. Brent, you're kind of backish, so we'll start with you.
I am Brent Emmerich. I've been on the County Planning Commission for 5 years, and I would say maybe Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, because he's always in a good mood, bouncing around.
Okay.
Devin Keener, Planning Commission for let's see, Homer Simpson. What I would say, if I went Disney, I'd go with Mr. Incredible. I don't identify with
Madeline Say Bartle. I am the Planning Commission president for Churubusco. I don't know how long I've served, a long time. Favorite cartoon character, probably just the entire cast of Archer, because it's hilarious. So.
Okay. And before we get too far in front, behind you.
I'm Rosie Anderson. I'm on the South Whitley Planning Commission. This is my 2nd year. And I'm going to work Whitley because I have a 5-year-old and I want to talk about Whitley.
Pat?
Pat Stanford, Churubusco Planning Commission. Don't remember how long I've served, and probably Scooby-Doo.
Viv Say, Churubusco Planning Commission since 2019, and probably Marge Simpson's sisters, Patty or something. Not sure what.
Dennis Warren, Columbia City Planning Commission, 30+ years. Probably Piglet.
Kelly Sheets, Whitley County Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm not sure how long, 5 years, 4 years maybe, something, 3 years? Just
Going on 5.
Okay, 5 years. Been very memorable, see, I guess probably Foghorn Leghorn, because not because he's just a chicken, but he can whoop up on people with a baseball bat, that's perfectly acceptable.
Travis Baker, county planning, 3 years. Tasmanian devil, because everything's out of control.
Hold on, Don walked in. Don?
Yeah.
Who you are, which jurisdiction you're with, how long you've been on that, and who's your favorite cartoon character?
I don't have one. No good.
Okay, you're on the City Plan Commission. How long have you been on the Plan Commission?
20, 25 years.
Who's that, Mike?
Okay. Chip?
Chip Hill, City Point Commission, 6 years, and let's go with Kung Fu Panda.
Okay. Pat Zekraft, Columbia City Plan, I'm going to say it's been 5 or 6 years. And I'm going to say Daphne Duck.
Dan Weagold, Columbia City Plan Commission, Columbia City Council, Columbia City Board of Works, and Whitley County GIS Coordinator. Then started my fifth term as City Council. I'm not sure how many years I've been on my commission. I know it's been longer than being on City Council. But my favorite character is Eeyore. I was in a little more.
Okay.
Joe Wolf. I'm on Whitley County Planning Commission and also Whitley County BZA. I've been on Plan Commission 8 years and BZA 4, 5. So my favorite cartoon character is Marvin the Martian. Just because he's cool.
Yeah. Pat?
Pam Catcher, Columbia City BCA, 3 months. And Snoopy.
Ooh.
Danny Wilkinson, Whitley County BCA, been on for at least a couple months, and my favorite character is Garfield.
Doug?
Doug Wright, Whitley County BZA. I don't know how long. 8 or 10 years, I suppose.
A few months.
Yeah. And Mighty Mouse.
Oh, that's a good one too. Lot of variety there. I'm impressed. Okay, so if you remember from last year, what we will do, same format. Basically, Brent will figure out who starts by whatever means he decides, and we'll just go around. Just give me one of the numbers off the question list, and Brent will skip to that slide, and then we'll discuss it. The ones that are crossed off are the ones that we did last year. I kept them on here just so that they were there for reference. So if you happen to be one who selects a slide that has a star on it that says prize, you get to pick from our prize basket. Used to be a bucket, now it's basket. And then hopefully we can get to everybody, have a chance to get a prize. If not, those who haven't will just be able to swarm the basket by the end of the meeting session. So Brent, who do we start with?
Somebody raise their hand. All right, Brent Emery.
33.
33. What building inspections are required? Are those not in order?
Yeah, but page 33 is not slide 33. So question 33 is not slide 33.
Should be.
Well, maybe it is, and I couldn't see it very well. Quit
Okay.
asking questions.
Do you need?
I got them. I just got glasses. I'm good.
Okay. So what building inspections are required? So when people ask us that, the rule of thumb that we give everyone is before concrete is poured, call for an inspection, and before you cover up anything or before anything is enclosed, call for an inspection. So generally that list is, and this list is very similar to most places. Allen County has a very finite list, checklist basically. This is similar to that, but condensed down. So generally you start out with footers, post holes, foundation. So again, before you have concrete. Under slab, so any sort of plumbing, electrical, heating under the slab before you pour the slab. Your rough ends, which can be generally lumped as mechanicals, quote unquote. That'd be your framing, electrical, plumbing, HVAC. Those are all usually done at the same time. And then because insulation typically covers all of that stuff up, you do insulation separately and have a separate insulation inspection before you put drywall up. Electric service would be your meter base. Sometimes that's done with your electrical rough. Sometimes it's separate. Sometimes you have temp electric. Sometimes it's other factors. And then final inspection, just when everything is done, or at least everything that is subject to the building code is done. That's your final inspection. There are other inspections that could be done, interim and so on, but those are your basics for new construction, commercial, residential, and so on.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please do.
So during the first inspection, which is the footers or pull stools, that's normally when the inspectors check to make sure that the structure is going to be, you're putting it where you said you were going to put it according to the site plan. That's when we check setbacks, make sure that your distance from septic and well are what code is requiring to. So there's a setback verification during that first inspection.
And our inspectors are not surveyors, so they are not out there measuring to the 10th of the foot for setbacks, but they are pretty knowledgeable about what's 5 feet versus 7 feet, for example. So if it comes down to it, we can get a surveyor out there to figure out exactly how close you are, or at least have the applicant pay for one. But the inspectors are pretty tuned to it. So any questions on this one or other thoughts? Okay, Viv.
I just have a question. I retired from taking notes. Would you pronounce?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to give you these and steal my thunder beforehand. These will come afterwards.
I just didn't want to take notes, but I didn't have to.
No. You take some notes if it's not genuinely on the screen, but yeah, we'll get you the questions that we covered tonight. Which way should we go?
I think Dan had his hand up, didn't he?
Dan had his hand up next.
Yeah, since we're going to be discussing this Monday, number 46.
What's up with front yard fences? What up with that? So this is a question that Busco has been dealing with recently, and the city in different capacity, and South Whitley has a whole different way of handling it, and the county's way is nice because it just doesn't deal with fences. But the diagram's up here, and I totally know if you can't read those, but Brent, you should be able to get the laser pointer and point, I think. No, not the laser pointer, the one on.
Oh, I don't know how to do that.
Bear with me.
Watching you two work together is just amazing.
There we go.
All right, here we go. Can everybody see that? Moving that.
So the far left-hand diagram there is where a fence is allowed in Columbia City and Churubusco. The green area is where a more than 3 foot tall fence could be. So it's basically the defined side yard, which for fences is a side yard. For other things, it's a front yard. And then the rear yard and the true side yard for corner lots. The orange area there is where a 3 foot fence or a 4 foot chain link fence could go. And the salmon color is the street right of way. When you look at South Whitley, the dark green area is the area that a tall fence could go. And the light green, sagey color is where South Whitley requires a special exception public hearing to be held for any front yard fence. which includes the front yard setback, which would be that left side. For everybody, what am I thinking here? Oh, if you have a platted building line, so a subdivision, modern subdivision especially, then that trumps the code's definition of what is a front yard and a side yard, and you have the green area is where you can have the over 3 foot tall fence. The orange area would be limited to 3 foot tall. The county, dark green, fences are allowed everywhere, except for that little triangle there at the intersection because of the site visibility. You can't get that close. Now it does say, and I know you can't really read it from any distance, but it does say that any fence within the county right-of-way is subject to the county highway. So sometimes they do allow some encroachment, and that's up to them. With the towns, it's up to the town council, and with the city board of works. So that starts to get to some of the question about front yard fence. Brent, just go ahead and click. Just click on the slide. So the other.
I just did click on the next slide?
No, just click on the slide. Okay, this is really slow tonight.
Yes,
so
it is.
Feel like Sean Connery. One click only, please.
I'm trying.
Okay, back one more. And now hit the forward button. I'm hearing lots of, okay, anyway, he'll get it eventually. The other part of this slide is there we go, are diagrams of what would be opaque fences as well as transparent fences. And so the municipal regulations on height start to get at, without explicitly stating, what is transparent and what is opaque. So if you limit it to 3 foot tall, you're allowing for clear visibility above that. But there are some types of fences that they're so transparent that they could be 5 or 6 feet tall and wouldn't really matter. And so that's the next level. You go from simply regulating height and placement to the actual type as well as height and placement. And that is, I think, where the city is going to go next, most likely, and then probably soon thereafter, Busco, and potentially South Whitley as well. I don't see the county implementing any fence regulations anytime soon. So, yes, Kelly.
Out in the county, not around a residence, but if you have 2 properties and there's a property line and someone puts up their own homemade fence, that's perfectly fine.
Yep. Indiana state law has a fence law. And so that if you have a fence that defines a property line, so it's actually on the line or close enough that it defines, then that statute comes into play. And that's usually, it really came from back when you were staking out your claim to your property and dividing up livestock especially. So it states who maintains what side of the fence and how much and so on. It's not used too terribly much anymore because we have other purposes for fences. But yeah, we don't regulate height, material, or anything else in the county until it gets so tall that it actually becomes a structure. So there is, at some point, it's no longer a self-supporting structure and it actually is subject to the building code. What that height is, it's pretty tall.
Yeah, the only time that we would get involved with a fence in county is when it's in floodplain.
Yeah.
But if it's right on that property line, it's fine.
Yep, state statute comes into play. Between the property owners, you would sort out whether it's trespassing or not. It's a great question. I say we don't regulate it, but there are still regulations for fences in the county. Other questions, thoughts on fences, or at least front yard fences? Okay, who do we do next? First to touch their nose?
Who did it? Joe? You didn't touch your nose, everybody else did.
I saw Dennis actually. So Dennis,
all right.
Give us a number.
36.
36, how do I make a new cemetery? Oh, this one has a star.
Joe Dennis.
You get first prize.
Oh my.
I'll just leave this. Okay.
Leave it there.
Put it right there. Okay. Kind of pressing my memory because this is one from last year and it's not one I deal with too frequently. So we'll see what the slide says. So, okay. So special exception, cemeteries are special exceptions in all of the A1 districts, which are municipal, as well as AG agricultural in the county. As a special exception, what you would be looking for the BZA members, you primarily review for the appropriateness of the location, so it's not much different than normal. Look at the traffic, the views, so some people like to look at cemeteries, some don't, so that's, again, surrounding property owners. More importantly, perhaps, more of a focus would be your accessory uses, so things like chapels, is there a crematorium, is there a other type of hall, other types of accessory uses that might be a generation of traffic, noise, things like that, be used in non-standard hours. As well as, and this is an interesting one, adjusting and watching out for the potential impact on property values. This was one thing that we found out during the solar code development. Cemeteries and solar farms have kind of comparable effects on property values. When you have a new cemetery go in, a lot of times you actually have a decrease in surrounding property values because people don't like the idea of a cemetery being near them. So they want to get out, they'll sell for a lower price because of that. But they'll sell to people who want to live next to a cemetery because it's quiet, you know what you're going to get for perpetuity and so on, or at least a long time. And so over time, those property values will actually rebound and either normalize back out or potentially even be higher, just depends on the specifics of the case. Solar farms were actually similar. There are quite a few people who want to live next to solar farms. There are quite a few people who don't. And so when you balance that out, eventually it'll work. The property values work their way out. But immediate, it's an adverse effect. Click on that another time, see if there's another part to that. Oh, yes, there is. The other part is DNR and state law does get involved. The DHPA, Division of Historic Preservation and Archaeology, oversees cemetery regulations. They have a registry, or had a registry. Not sure if it's still in existence or still being kept up. There are other state regulations as well dealing with the makeup of cemetery plots and a perpetual ownership association and so on, none of which we would deal with at a local level, but all of which would have to be something that someone who wants to create a new cemetery gets involved with. I think there's one more piece to this one. Yes, so other types discussed recently, and recently being the last 10 years or so, for-profit cemeteries. This would be, upcoming trend would be a quote-unquote natural burial. So basically you take your deceased person and bury them in accordance with state law, but in as biodegradable fashion as possible. So cardboard casket, for example, straight into very live soil, I guess, a lot of organic matter, and possibly intersperse it with trees. Like I said, there's a huge trend on this just to have a cemetery that's a cemetery, but it turns over. Have had a church or two that have proposed additions to cemeteries or new cemeteries. Those kind of protected because they're a church, but they still follow basic regulations. And then family cemeteries, as it says, plop grandma in the backyard. Under Indiana law, as far as I can tell, you can do that. You do have to follow the law about embalming and so on, just like you do with the others. But a family cemetery and establishing a family cemetery, you record a few documents and away you go. So, yes.
Who takes care of them when the family's all gone?
The family cemetery? That's a good question. That's why.
There's one out here on Old 30.
Mm-hmm.
That's a family cemetery that the property must have been sold a couple of years ago. Now that you can see the cemetery, but the fence is gone around it.
Yep. Yeah, that's where the state comes into play to some degree and why they have state laws now. As you guys probably know, many of our old church cemeteries and some of the family cemeteries have been picked up by township trustees over the past century and a half. So I'm sure there's a process by which that happens too.
Do they have to be marked? Like,
Gravestones?
yeah,
No
so
gravestones?
just like burying the dog or the goldfish, and you bury grandma and then you don't mark it, and then somebody
Goes to build a house there, and they
Yeah.
get grandma.
Right. I don't think there is actually a specific requirement for marking it, but marking or knowing where the location is something. So the bounds of the cemetery is supposed to be known, but where each plot is within that cemetery area, I don't think there is a specific requirement, at least for family cemeteries.
If there was ashes, it wouldn't matter anyway. Ashes to ashes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I figured. Just start that.
For what it's worth, my house was built on a grave, so it happens. Yeah, Pat.
I don't know that it's affecting here in this area, but I know some of the larger metropolitan areas are starting to deal with Muslim cemeteries, buying up land, trying to buy property in order to do that.
That would be a new trend as well, but yeah, we haven't seen that here, but I could see that happening as well. And there, if I recall correctly, Muslim cemeteries wind up being more natural. Same thing as Hebrew cemeteries. Okay, yeah.
As much as 3 deep.
Okay, that part I didn't know.
Chicago.
Okay. Things we would research if we had such a request.
Yes.
So, let's see. Any other thoughts on cemeteries? Oh, Viv.
How many times do you deal with this in a year? Cemeteries.
I think since I've been here for almost 10 years, I think I've had number of inquiries about 5. More people, legitimate inquiries like, hey, I have a site, what can I do with it? I've had more people ask, but.
Before or after they killed grandma? Asking for a friend. No.
Don, you had it, part 2?
Yeah. Number 29, where it references licensing and registration requirements. Are there any new ones that come about in the last few years?
Well, let's skip to 29. Don, that'll be your question. Okay, licensing and registration requirements. Short answer is going to appear anytime. No. This is for our office specifically. But generally, the county and the city don't have licensing and registration requirements for any contractors. I believe the city does have a solicitation license, do they not? Does Busco have, so Busco has solicitation, does South Whitley? So all the municipalities have solicitation requirements. We do have some other registration, again, outside of our department, but for building contractors, we don't have anything. Plumber's license is required by the state, so we do require that license number as part of our application process. Basically, we found that we haven't needed to implement a licensing or registration program in the county. Contractors tend to do what they need to, and word gets out if you don't. As opposed to Allen County. Allen County charges an arm and a leg for their registration, but you actually get in return some reassurance that that contractor has gone through some certification through them. So it's a balancing act there. Takes some overhead to administer a registration program, which we don't really have to. Are there any other parts to that one, Brent? Larwell does have a rental registration program. So that is land use related. So if you're a landlord in Larwell, you do have to register. I think there's one more part. I guess also land use related. The health department has licensing requirements for food service, pools, tattoo shops, and so on. So our codes work in conjunction with theirs, where they say that you can place a tattoo shop overlaps with our tattoo shop placement. Adult uses, the health department doesn't regulate. As far as I know, that's only zoning code. In case you wanted to open one of those. Any other parts of that one, Brent? Nope. Okay. Kelly.
Number 50.
Number 50, can fines be applied to violations? Oh, that's prize. Take one. So while she's picking out her prize, what'd you get? Ooh, Reese's.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's a Reese's cupcake even. Never seen one of those. So yes, fines can be applied to violations. All of our zoning codes have fines in the enforcement sections. The amounts vary. The county is different than the municipalities. The county has an escalating fine system of, I think it starts at $75 for the first notice violation, and then it mounts its way up to $250 per violation for the fifth notice, with a total maximum set out of all those different fines of $2,000. As opposed to the municipalities, which just say fines are $500 per violation, violations are per day. So you can add up pretty fast with the municipal violations. Neither of them is actually the maximum that state code allows, which is $2,500 for the first violation, which in the municipalities would be day one, and $7,500 for every other violation after that, which would be day 2 through whatever. So yes, fines can be applied. However, all of our jurisdictions, the fines only get paid as a product of a court judgment. So we'd actually have to follow through with a lawsuit, and those fines would then be applied as part of that. Or in a rare instance, we might actually take the fines to the court, and rather than the typical situation of having the court do an injunction against whatever the violation is, if the violation is resolved, but we still want to accumulate the fines, that would still have to go through the courts. That is as opposed to the way some jurisdictions do it, which are to levy fines as part of the ticketing process, which can be really effective if you have some types of violations that are really easy to resolve. Temporary signage might be one example. Tall grass is another, but that's not one that we enforce. The problem, though, with ticketing is oftentimes tickets don't yield the resolution that you're looking for, the compliance that you're looking for. You're just sending out tickets and they just accumulate, just like, next hunk to this, just like cars with windshields full of tickets. The next step after that would be beyond ticketing and wind up being towing a vehicle or otherwise dealing with the violation. So
how do you, like, if there is somebody gets a special exception, you get a complaint that they're not following it, and is that considered a violation, and how do you enforce that? And you because you talked about it's only on a court judgment. Do people have to take legal action?
Ultimately, if we don't get resolution, we take it to court. Usually the property owners want to do right, or we give an alternative to say, to bring it into compliance, do this. And that's 95% of the time where enforcement goes. But the leverage is to say, if you don't, fines can be applied, this can go to court, and all of the things that the courts can do can also come into play. Courts can increase the amounts fined tremendously, for example, and then you can also have jail time and so on, well beyond what we can have as a civil agency. So that's in the rare instance. Much more typical is we'll send the first notice as a quote-unquote soft notice saying, hey, we noticed you have a violation. Please do this by 2 weeks from now, or whatever the time frame is, and that'll get the ball rolling and that discussion rolling on how to resolve it. And fortunately, most people, they want to comply. Like I said, about 5% of the time, we get no response, or we have to enlist the courts to really get the action that we need.
So the city hired a code enforcement person? Will that be that person's job to follow through on just complaints, or will they actively make sure people are complying with?
They will be code enforcement across the board, all of the city's codes, including some of the zoning code, the initial seeking out, because we don't have the manpower to go out and actually drive up and down the city streets looking for violations. We're complaint based in that way. And so they'll send the initial notice, but ultimately if it gets too far into it, they'll hand it over to us to do the heavy lifting of exactly how it fits into the zoning code, how it goes to the BZA, how it then goes to the court system.
So you put, however, our codes, like, is that a county-based or is that a state code? Our codes are set up to be paid upon conviction. Like, is that something that we can change to?
You can change it, yes, and that's all of our county codes. And the easiest thing to change it to would be more of a ticketing process, which is payable, and then you sue if they don't pay. But again, ticketing has some pros and cons to it.
So do the fines, if they're unpaid, can they become a lien against the property?
If you take it to the court. Yeah, that again, I believe is the difference between how soon it gets there. If you have a ticket process, it can get there a little sooner, as I understand it, versus filing for injunction with the fines being added on as essentially penalty.
How many of those have you had in your term here?
Violations?
Yeah, fines.
Oh, fines?
Got fined.
One, we've threatened a lot, but because our goal is compliance and not monetary gain, it's not so meaningful. Court costs are something that's much more meaningful. But yeah, there was one case where it was just, the court agreed that no, the fines were definitely appropriate. And that was actually really early on, about 10 years ago, early on when I got here. Okay, let's see, Chip.
Yes, I'll throw you a softball. Could you explain number 17 to me?
Who handles permits for development? That sounds like one you want to answer.
Oh, I'm just curious.
It's called Ask Us Anything. You're part of us.
Oh, okay, well then let's move to...
No. Well, you said it, and we have it up there. So who handles permits for development? That would be the planning department, building department, highway, street, NDOT, utilities. They all have different, most of them have permitting processes, be it the public utilities of sewer, water, and electric if it's a public electric. Gas has their own application process, not so much permit process. The drainage board or your MS4, the soil and water conservation district gets involved. IDEM in terms of wetlands, Army Corps in terms of wetlands, IDEM in terms of Brownfield development as well. So you have an old industrial site you want to build on, you need to have permitting through that for remediation. Health department, as I mentioned, for food service, septic, wells. Engineering gets involved with drainage, and I don't know what else they get involved with. A lot of different other things. I mentioned highway. Actually, engineering helps out highway quite a bit. So all of those and then some. That was a softball.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pat?
What is spot zoning?
What is spot zoning? Which number is that?
27.
2027. Okay. Spot zoning is a topic that we talk about a lot and means, well, it means pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward, but the actual back end of it is much more complicated. So to read that, the application of zoning to a specific parcel or parcels of land within a larger zoned area when the rezoning is usually at odds with a comprehensive plan and current zoning restrictions. The spot zoning, and this is really important, arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable treatment of a limited parcel of land by a local zoning ordinance. While zoning regulates the land use in whole districts, spot zoning makes unjustified exceptions for a parcel or parcels within a district. Are there more parts to that, Grant? Okay, so that is really, that first paragraph there is really emphasizing it's got to be unfair. It's arbitrary, capricious. It's not just the fact that you are taking the zoning map and saying, within this big green area, we're going to have a dot of red, or literally a spot of red for commercial, or purple for industrial, or whatever. If it's justified, that spot of zoning district could be okay. If it lines up with the comp plan, if it's justified by the conditions of the land, whatever it may be. If it's just because you like the landowner and his neighbor wouldn't otherwise be zoned the same way, even though they have pretty much an identical parcel, that's spot zoning. It's giving favoritism or inequitable treatment between parcels that are otherwise should be treated the same. I will say, though, it's not great practice to have spots all over the place, but it's not necessarily bad practice either. And that's where that second part comes in. This doesn't prevent creating small zoning districts. So you could have a zoning district that may only be one lot big if it's got some really compelling reason to be. It's at a corner of two major intersections, had been zoned in residential, but somebody wanted to put a store in there, and that visibility of the traffic makes a lot of sense to have it be commercial. Well, it's still going to be a spot of commercial among a big residential area, but there are really compelling reasons to be there. But importantly, anytime you change districts, anytime for the BZA, anytime you approve a special exception or a variance even, it doesn't create a spot on a map, but you do have to be aware of being fair, equitable, making sure that you have findings to back up what you want to do. And again, the worst thing is to deny somebody for some reason and then have their neighbor come in and get approved for basically the exact same thing, because that will lead to a challenge immediately. That is spot zoning in the worst way.
So do you think a data center in an agriculturally zoned area that's highly rural is spot zoning?
Depends on how you do it, because under our county zoning code, it would require a rezoning to industrial. And so if you can find that that's justified, great. That is another question here. If somebody wants to pick it, it's number 44. Don't go to, well, who wants to go to 44? Okay, go to 44.
Real quick, Nathan, but back to spot zoning.
Yeah.
There's been some rumbling. Do you think the state will eventually get involved in some additional regulations regarding spot zoning, because it's coming up in a lot of different specifically, I think because of things like this.
So the state probably won't. There's only one state that I know of that actually has a definition and a prohibition against spot zoning, and it's, I believe, Arkansas. All other states have very similar tax of it's up to the local level to figure out what's appropriate. More likely what will happen is the state will swoop in and create very specific regulations and overrule the locals by those regulations. So what they're trying to do with wind and solar, what they've done with CFOs to some degree, various other uses. So I could see that happening with data center. So this is a prize, so who wants a prize?
Travis.
Travis.
I think that'd be good.
There's a six-pack of beer behind you. Yes. Brett's holding on to it.
There's a ticket in there for.
Oh, ticket in there.
Yeah.
Only one.
So a data center is basically a building or a group of buildings. Typically what we are seeing right now is a group of buildings used to house computer systems and associated components such as telecommunications and storage systems. So it's basically, there's an example from Virginia, I believe that's Virginia. I want to say that total acreage was about 200 or so between the 6 buildings that you can see in that photo. By itself, they look like industrial buildings. The big issues that are really important ones to consider from a land use standpoint, number one, electrical usage. Massive amounts of electric. 500 megawatts plus is typical. That is oftentimes offset by renewable energy. So oftentimes when you have a data center go in, you will have rooftop solar, you'll have solar farms adjacent. So they do reduce that overhead usage off the grid by doing that. But it's still a huge amount of power. And of course, nighttime you have that. Another land use that I didn't add on there is availability of the network. So you do have to have fiber, trunk lines, and so on. Whitley County does have a few nationwide fiber lines that could be tapped into, so we could be primed for that. We do have a lot of power lines coming through here. That's why we've had solar companies, wind companies looking at us because of those lines. They're not huge lines, but they're sufficient. And I'm going to take a guess, they're not tapped out. Land consumption, as I mentioned, 100 to 300 acres is pretty typical. Sometimes smaller, sometimes larger, but that seemed to be the pretty frequent one when I was putting this together. Another major one is the number of employees per acre. You have, for some of them, even the larger ones, you may have 15 employees for 200 acres worth of buildings. That's kind of extreme, more likely maybe 50 to 100. But as opposed to SDI, which is on, about 400 acres and has 1,000, 2,000 employees, however many employees they've got, huge difference. Difference in effects too. SDI has other effects that data centers don't. Another one that is sometimes not thought of immediately is many data centers require water for their cooling systems. And what do you do with that water once it's done? Does it go into the treatment center? Is it recycled? Does it go into drainage?
Is there enough in the aquifer?
Is there enough in the aquifer? Yep. So a lot of different things there. Do they treatment of it on their own? Do they need to have softened water? And if they have softened water, where does that soft water go? So yep.
Do you see once a data center comes in somewhere that they try not to place them too close together, or is there, do you see a trend on where the placement of them are?
I would have to look into it more to give you a full answer, but from what I could find more or less quickly as I was putting this together, They do tend to try and locate together because they have the same reasons to be there. So your utilities, your broadband, and so on. Plus, if one gets approved, more likely than not, another one will get approved. But that I would say time will tell, and I would also have to do more research on what has been approved. Data centers, at this scale, are only a couple years old. Let's see, which row have we not? We've hit every single row. Braylon, you're by yourself back there. How about you? 31. What agencies review subdivision and development plans? So this is similar to the other one. Another relatively softball one, but important differences here. We have planning, because we cover everything. Public utilities, which include water, sewer, electric, stormwater if you have an MS4. Transportation, which would be your street, highway, and NDOT again. Drainage, stormwater. Erosion control, which for Whitley County is through either the MS4 or Soil and Water Conservation District, which are both John Goetz, and Health Department. Those are our key agencies that review subdivisions and development plans. County engineering also gets involved. The parcel committee gets involved with subdivisions to make sure that the subdivision as proposed is actually recordable, making sure that the names are right, all the recording information is in the right spots, and so on. So you've got a long list of different agencies, different than permitting, but a lot of overlap as well. Okay, who's next? Shout one out.
37.
Okay, the other Pat, 37. How are the recipients of public notices selected? Oh, this is one that for the municipalities, we all updated our rules of procedure here 2 years ago now, I think. So we had some discussion about this. But Indiana Code states that the rules of each Plan Commission and BZA must specify who is an interested party in a public hearing. Doesn't give you more guidance than that. So you just have to specify who gets notice. Indiana Code specifies for rezonings that are adjacent to a county line that the notice does have to go into the adjacent county by 2 property ownerships deep or 660 feet, whichever is satisfied first. Because of that one rule, that's typically applied by most jurisdictions, and we now do the same thing. That rule is applied to all public notice. So that's where the 2 property ownerships or 660 feet comes from, is from that one state statute. Otherwise, you could say, and this can vary based upon type of case, you could have different rules for variances, even for different types of variances. Maybe a setback variance requires 3 property ownerships deep all the way around, but you don't care how far it goes. But a sign variance, maybe you have to notify everybody within 1,500 feet along the street, but not all the way around. A lot of different ways you can make it work. The more rules you have, the more administrative headache and overhead it takes for us to correctly apply them. So one size is great, but you guys do specify your own rules. So the bottom one, I think I covered all the others. Staff determines the recipients based on a current property ownership map. We do that. Typically, we are the ones sending out the mailed notices. Sometimes petitioner wants to for various reasons. Attorneys especially like to do it on their own, but we will still give them the list of landowners to send to. Other interested parties, your on-site notice signs, that's another mechanism of interested parties. So by assumption, you see a yellow sign out there and you show up at the meeting, you're an interested party because you were interested enough to make an appearance or to send a letter if you're not at the meeting. That makes you an interested party as well by default. So that's another way. Some places have requirements for putting advertisements on their local public access channel, for example, as well. Hey, this is upcoming hearing. I'm not sure how those work, but I know some places do that. So that's how they're selected. Let's see.
Nathan is like an upcoming whatever for plan or BZA.
Mm-hmm.
Is that on your website as well?
The agendas are posted on the county's website, so the department's website, yes. They're posted on our front window of the office because the statute says that you have to post the meeting notice on the office of the board, so that's our office. And then at the meeting itself, you have to have copies of the agenda available, either posted or available for distribution. So those are the other ways that notice goes out, and newspaper notice. There was a bill, it was just defeated in committee last week, to remove the newspaper notice requirement over the course of 2 years, make it optional, and implement a statewide notice website. But it was defeated 8-2 in the second House's committee. So unless that language gets picked up in another bill somewhere, if that idea is dead. So I think we probably can do 1 or 2 more. Let's hear another number. 21, lucky 21. Can development occur in the floodplain? Shout it out.
Yes, but.
Okay. Right. I was hoping that was a little slower. Yes, but keep going. It's highly regulated by flood protection, flood prevention section of each zoning code. And everybody has basically the same flood prevention code. Churubusco, you guys have it, even though you have absolutely no floodplain in town. At least you do in the jurisdictional area over by, as you get close to Blue Lake. But I think there's all of about 2 properties over there. I think you do have 1 property that has flood insurance, though.
Has what?
Carries flood insurance.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, just randomly. It's not required because you don't have any floodplain.
A floodplain is where it floods when we have too much rain or.
So,
right?
yeah, so what floodplain is it's also known as the 1% annual chance flood zone. And it has a couple other names too. But think of it as the 100-year floodplain, 1% equivalent. And that is the area where in such an event, you would have floodwaters. And within that overall flood plain, so from here to here on each side of a river, within that then you have floodway, which is where water would actually be moving in a flood event. So you actually have velocity with that. Flood fringe is what the area between floodway and the edge of the floodplain is called. Floodway, the area where floodwaters are moving, we don't regulate directly. State actually still regulates that. So if you want to build in the floodway, you talk to DNR and the state first, and then if they permit it, then it comes back to us to finish the permitting. If you're in the fringe, which is what we usually just call the floodplain, that's where these standards come into play of you have to build, new residences have to be at least 2 feet above that base flood elevation, which is the elevation of that flood. Businesses have to be at least 2 feet above or have flood protection. So if they're not 2 feet above your flood level, they can be down here, but you have to have flood protection. So automatic gates, for example, that close in a flood event all the way up to 2 feet above. Filling is a common question. We do allow for filling in the floodplain, but it has to be, there has to be an equal or greater volume added to the volume of the floodplain, which is known as compensatory storage. So if you add 2 yards of fill, you have to take out 2 yards of dirt to increase the volume of the floodplain. Which also has to be in the same floodplain on the same parcel. So if you're up the lakes and you have a 40-foot wide lot up there, it's really hard to get that compensatory storage to fill in. We've had 1 or 2 that have been able to create swales and stuff, but it's pretty difficult. So is there another section to that one? Utilities are generally exempt. Indiana gives utilities a lot. Yeah, I know. From floodplain.
Are parks utilities or?
Are parks utilities? No.
Oh, okay.
Are you telling me I need to be writing up a permit or a violation
I
notice?
just know that we had to jump through some hoops for the new bathrooms, aka old new bathrooms.
Yes, you did, and I appreciate that. So no, it's a good point. IURC regulated utilities are exempt in most ways. There are still some times that even they have to go through DNR permitting, especially if they're putting, say, poles in the floodway, for example, or building a bridge. Is there another section to that, Brent? You mentioned floodway, development goes to DNR. Is there another? Okay. Did that answer floodplain questions well enough? Floodplain can be its own entire section, by the way. Actually, there's...
You don't have to worry about it, because Costco doesn't have it.
But it's worth knowing.
I'm curious because we approved that housing petition and they were all talking about the flooding.
Flooding and floodplain as a regulatory thing are different. Yeah. Now, the floodplain regulations do have a provision for quote-unquote flood-prone areas, so areas that you know constantly flood but may not be mapped. And they basically say if you know that's a condition, then the whole regulations still apply. And you have to figure out what those elevations are and so on. It's very difficult to do, and you run the burden of having to show what that elevation is, so you run into a lot of costs in doing that. Some places it's really important. In Indiana, fortunately, because most of our waterways are mapped by the state already. Indiana is amazingly progressive in terms of flood code. We don't have to go out and figure out elevations at the local level because the state's already done it.
And if I remember right, that was that Thresher's Ridge addition. They said there was a broken tile and it was the county's to repair. Is that correct?
I don't remember.
So we didn't go into all that.
Right. Yep. If you have a broken tile, it doesn't yield a floodplain. Can yield a wetland, but that's a different question. 4 after. Let's do one more and call it good. 42. What is zoning by bank? Anybody heard this term before? Oh, you get a prize.
Who's got the most money?
There might be something to that.
So, has anybody heard this term zoning by bank before? Nobody?
Who's got the most money?
No. Actually, it's not. There are other words for that, but not this one. So zoning by bank is a derogatory term, so don't use it in a public meeting, please, unless you know what you're doing. But it is, we run into it in 2 instances. One is a lender requiring the rezoning of a property in order to obtain financing. The intention is to protect the lender from non-compliant uses that could jeopardize their investment. Makes a lot of sense, which it also promotes compliance with the zoning code. If you rezone to make it compliant, that's a great thing. But by just arbitrarily saying you have to rezone in order to get financing to continue whatever use you already have, say house in a commercial area, for example, can run afoul of the comprehensive plan recommendations, which is bad, and can be completely unnecessary, which is really just asinine. And so in the city's case, we've had this several times. The city's commercial code districts allow for single-family dwellings by right. So we have houses in our downtown commercial district that we have had, I think, 3 cases this has come up. We've had lenders saying, we won't lend you money unless you rezone to a residential district. We sent them letters saying, no, we're not going to do that. Our downtown district is established. They're not going to be approved. And by the way, this is a permitted by right use. In one of those instances, it took 3 lenders to find one that finally said, oh, okay, yeah, great, we'll lend you money. So that's one instance of zoning by bank, probably the worst of the 2. The other one that we run into is a lender that requires the splitting of a parcel to lend only on a part of the property. It used to be, especially prior to 2008, that you got a mortgage and your mortgage would say it applied only to the house and surrounding acre or 2 of land, even though the entire parcel you owned was like 20 acres. Since 2008, banks have really said, no, this has to be, what we're lending on is only that 2 acres, and it has to be separate from everything else. And so once you start splitting things, you look at surveys, you look at plats, public hearings, and so on. It adds up very quickly because the bank only wants to loan on that small piece. Reason being is if it has to go to foreclosure, it's easy to foreclose on. You're not worrying about, well, where's this line, what was included in the mortgage, what's not. But ultimately, the reason it's, again, a derogatory term, many times it's unnecessary. It's probably more necessary more often than the first one, which is almost always unnecessary. But still, we've had times where we've told lenders, look, is there any way that you can do this without splitting land? Because splitting it may trigger a rezoning through our zoning code, may trigger other requirements that are far and away beyond what the property owner really wants to or needs to. And especially if they want to hold the land for a long time, their mortgage is a 15-year mortgage and they're 30 and they want to own the land till they retire. It doesn't really make sense to split the land and then recombine it later, or resplit it just to fix the bank's desires early on. So that's what zoning by bank is. So if you ever hear me say that, no, it's not a kind term. So I'm going to call that good. It is 10 after, unless anybody has a desire to hear one more. Hearing none, we will save the rest for probably another time. Anybody who wants to grab a prize from the prize basket, feel free to do so on your way out. There are some really good ones in there. Or leave them for the next time. So, Brent, you want to skip to the next to last slide there? The last thing, June 30th is our next 5th Monday training session. That will be about ethics. I like to touch on ethics every few years or so, just to have some nice discussions. September 29th is the 3rd 5th Monday session, and unless we come up with a more priority topic, it'll be a roundtable, everybody just getting together, talking about a few different topics and commingling, kind of like what we did last fall as well. And then again, the 5th Monday in December was canceled because I think that's Christmas Eve, day after Christmas, something like that. So let me know if there's other ideas for training sessions, and let me know if you have other Ask Me Anything questions to add to the list for the next time. So with that, grab a prize, and I will see some of you tomorrow, and others of you next week and after that. Thanks for coming. Switch to the muted one.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. That's fine.
But it's like anything,